Although the ruin of Qumran has been known for more than a century, it was only in 1947 when over there in an ancient cave, a Bedouin young man discovered one of the most important manuscript troves of modern times. These were the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is Professor Sam Ivri of the Johns Hopkins University, one of the principal players in the drama of this discovery and telling of the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls back when Israel was becoming a state. Sam, I'd like to ask you, could you tell us how the people reacted to these discoveries then, and what was the situation in both then Palestine, Israel, and America, and how were the discoveries brought to the attention of the world?
The discovery came suddenly. It came like every great discovery is by accident. It had a dramatic background because it was found in the caves of the desert of Judea, and it was by a shepherd and his goats and going around and finding pieces of parchment. This went around in Israel in different rumors. The one who really caught these rumors was Sukenik, and Sukenik went after it very diligently. He also reached the next day Ben-Gurion, asking him if it is needed to spend some money, can I promise? And Ben-Gurion gave him even a sum, and he said, you can go till this sum and do whatever you want. Now, this thing was going on for several weeks and even a month and 2 months because of this situation in Israel. As we heard, the Jews could not enter anymore the old city, and the people from the old city were in a state of war, as is, with the Jewish community, until the American school were situated in the midst, in between these two cities, start its initiative. It's the first telephone that came from Drever to Albright at the seminar of Johns Hopkins. And on Wednesday, when the seminar took place, this story started getting a very high dramatic pitch, and it came out into the world.
What year was that, Sam?
Now, here is the same. This was in our situation. It was in 1948, around February, March. The situation was there. You have to know that it is Hopkins who has a very interesting background for it. Albright declared this semester that he wants to have this theme for the seminar, on which very fine scholars were there. He wants the Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha after 30 years or 40 years of Charles' edition. We have to say that till Charles, the Apocryphas and Pseudepigraphas, which have a lot to do with the Dead Sea Scrolls, were not given in one edited, well annotated form. When Charles issued it in 1910, at the year when Schechter also found the Damascus document at the Geniza, and it itself called to a dramatic exchange of opinions. In 1910, Charles made this daring step. He included the Damascus document in the volume 1 of the Apocryphas and Pseudepigraphas. All the scholarly world, perhaps 90%, and I see it from the writings, were against it, because the Apocrypha were more or less set. Part of them were like canonized. They were between the Old Testament and the New Testament. The church was giving to them a great value. They said it's an edifying document for Christian readers. But this Damascus document, which was written in Hebrew, they didn't understand at that time that this too is an apocryphal document written somewhere in the 1st or the 2nd century even BC, and the entrance of it has a lot to do with it. But Charles did it. When Charles did it, we in the seminar with Albright, in which there were 20 people, including me, Friedman, Cross, Daoud, and others were given papers. Each one were given a paper to read. You have to understand that this also was the anniversary of Schweitzer, the great humanitarian scholar, who had written a book in search of the historical Jesus. After giving away so many years for this search, he came to the conclusion there cannot be, and he didn't find any historical traces for this. Only in the Apocrypha, in pseudepigrapha, is a lot of material which put Jesus in the front of a new great movement and a new religion. Now, taking all this in account, Albright saw that this would be a very great theme. So he divided among them anybody who took Enoch, the Testament of the 12, whatever it came according to the way they were sitting. When it comes to me, this was my first year at Hopkins. I came from the camps. I was a refugee. My English was a little bit better than the normal people. And he knew that he has for me this controversial book, because it was written in Hebrew, and I was always a Hebrew scholar. When he gave me the book, he said, here you have 7 weeks, and you will have to read a paper. What is the Damascus document? It's true, I prepared it in 7 weeks, and when the calendar showed that I have to come, I came with a paper of 19 pages, and I had declared the following: that first of all, the Damascus document is genuine. It was written at the time of the Second Temple, and not, as the opinion of scholars was, in such a broad bore, in a broad frame, which put it from Paul till the Middle Ages. About 13 stations they assigned for it, including the 400, 600, 800, till 13, till the Crusades and over. I said that all this doesn't fit the content. And according to me, also I've talked also with Zeitlin. At that time was a man, Zeitlin, who was in Dropsy College and a great rabbinic scholar. I consider this from the Second Commonwealth was in language, which many of them didn't.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the seminar of Albright focused on the Apocrypha Pseudepigrapha, and you wrote a paper on the Damascus document. And it was in this context, in 1948, that the first news of the discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls came to Johns Hopkins.
After I finished the paper, and every paper when it's finished, and it's very good, Albright says this paper should be published immediately. This is what he says. He appointed a group of students, of scholars, to edit my paper and make it ready for publication. This paper served after that as my first dissertation ever written on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Whereas the other guys reached it later with more knowledge already. Now, when I was ready with this paper, a week later, the telephone rang and Albright was called out from the seminar. Seminar took place every Wednesday, and therefore they knew, Trevor and others, that Albright is on Wednesday there. And he called them out and he told them the thing, that some mysterious scrolls were found. One was opened, and it looks like this is a biblical scroll. And the other, he says, is a non-biblical scroll. And we tried to read in it something, but we don't make sense. So Albright called out, Sam, come in. And I came in because, here I make it very clear, because I finished my paper with the word of Poznansky, my former student in Warsaw in the Institute for Judaic Studies at the time, and he dealt with the Damascus document. Of course, I read it, and he said, this is a very mysterious book. We know it is written by a group which is outside of the official Judaism. This was my conclusion. But it's very difficult to decide the exact date. Maybe in 50 years from now, new discoveries will be made which will throw light on this. I read my paper 50 years after that. And I concluded both my paper and my dissertation with that. Therefore, when he called me in, I told him, don't talk to him, because it will take her long and he will not say. He doesn't perhaps pronounce the Hebrew, or he doesn't know too well. Tell him to spell each line, each word, and I will put it together. So he told him this. He spelled it. Albright told it to me. I wrote it down the way here. And after that I said, this scroll, the non-biblical scroll, has a lot to do with the Damascus document. I think these are the scrolls of the 50 years. I spoke like a prophet, knowing only 3-5 things around it. And Albright, on the basis of my very strong declaration and assurance that it is so, he called the press and he declared, this is the greatest archaeological discovery ever made. This went all over the country. And then came the times of starting to get these papers. Albright was holding on to me all the time for 4 years, because there were ups and downs. According to biblical scholars like Driver and others, this is not worth. According to a great biblical scholar in which I don't want to mention now his name is here, it's not worth the parchment on which the Isaiah was written. And he told me, Albright, you assured me at that time that this is a genuine from the Second Temple. But here you see Zeitlin, even in Israel, Turchiner, all of them deny any connection.
When did Albright first see the pictures of the Dead Sea Scrolls to authenticate
the Dead Sea Scrolls was the end of March, just as Friedman said. And then he showed it to us, and we see it. Now, to me, he told, that is your lifetime chance. Go enlarge the paper, follow it through, because I will want to have it for you in the form of a dissertation. The dissertation came out to be in 1951. In March was it ready. In May, I got my PhD. Many international groups, the Swedish Academy, others, wanted to have a copy of this paper. Albright very grudgingly gave it to people because he thought caves are being opened and things will be now discovered, and therefore we at Hopkins have to keep it under control. This keeping under control, what we hear today, is not new, because we understand the scholars. There are no sources for it. There are no things that you can go in the back door, find out and write. This alone is the document. Therefore, if you work on this document, you want to finish it and to have it. I don't justify the situation of there, but Albright wanted his students, all of them, to start working on it. 4 years later, Cross wrote his book. Later, also Baumgarten at Hopkins joined it. What my contribution is, the history of this group, the preliminary history, the building up history, and how they developed. My contribution of it will be summarized, and it is until now the most important thing for understanding the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Damascus document. The name of my dissertation was The Damascus Document and the Dead Sea Scrolls. I showed the actual connection between the two. I discussed the difficulties in language that shows that's a late Hebrew language. How late? And on this language, not on Cardon 14, not on anything, but on my definition of the language and the place of the language of the scroll in the history of the Hebrew language. Until now, there is my article in Eretz Israel in the Orlinsky volume, when I give it in Hebrew, לסידוד המערכה הלשונית של כתבי ים המלח, on reworking the state of the language in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The thing which I wanted to say and which I showed it until now was how the group came into being. What was their difference of the existing Judaism? And what has it to do with the scholars contemporary, with Christianity, and with other movements which were outside of Judaism? In the meantime, the world started to reverberate with certain statements which are either exaggerated or they were not based on a very specific reading of the text. For instance, Dupont-Sommer was the one who said that this gave the first, and what did they say? Let me remember. This gave the first understanding of how the story of Jesus came into being. The other thing is what he said is, actually, the cradle of Christianity should have been not in Bethlehem, but in Qumran. This was too strong for the Christian world to take it. This was too strong also for some scholars to agree to it. Of course, after that came a long succession of articles to show that you have to damp it a little. You have to muffle it a little, because this is too exaggerated. Let me say what Albright says. Albright says, in relation to me, this is not only the greatest discovery, but it shows how deep the roots of Christianity stick in Judaism. And to me, he said, had this discovery been made before World War II, perhaps there would not have been a Holocaust, because the Christians all over the world would see how much they themselves have in their spiritual understanding of the past to thank these kind of groups which came in Judaism. This kind of groups broke away from the official Judaism in Jerusalem. They prepared the way for a larger breakaway and for the parting of the ways.
Sam, I want to ask you, what do you think of the whole controversy today about the Dead Sea Scrolls and non-publication, access to the material, and what the media has done?
Here I want to say, before I'll answer you, real scholars, great and serious scholars, have taken up this question. Stendhal, in the question the Dead Sea Scroll and Christianity, mobilized all non-European and American scholars in the question. They took up the following question: the Last Supper, the miraculous birth, the organization of the church, the word bishop from word overseer. And after that, Blake undertook another book, which is under the same title, Christianity and the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Jewish world, was only Cyrus Gordon, who said that this has as much also to do with Judaism, because never in Judaism was it said, and this will come to them for their suffering and for their believing in the teacher of righteousness. This in Judaism was a very strange statement. Judaism never believes in a man. And the combination of their suffering, of their hard work, and the man, him, hits also Judaism, that this was a group which turned off a little bit from the screen. Jewish scholars, mostly Baumgarten and Fishman dealt with the halacha. In these writings and later scrolls, like the temple scroll, there's a lot of things which has to do with the halachic situation at that time and with the Targumic excerpts which has to do with the situation then. Therefore, nobody, after this discovery and after these two books, everybody concentrated, first of all, in the biblical part of it and in the language part of it. Those are the relation between these Dead Sea Scrolls and the Apocrypha. They did it on a scale unprecedented. It turned to be one of the best, most sought after themes that existed at that time. The situation continued further until it came to the point where many comprehensive books were written about that. About the question that you asked me, I believe that 80%, as it was said lately in a statement, of the scrolls, the very important scrolls, who make this statement, and perhaps some historical statements, were already opened up. I don't believe that in the fragments and into other pieces which Stragnell gave to his students who don't know Hebrew, learned Hebrew from a beginning, it's as unimportant what they will say and as unimportant what it will come out from it, because the material, as I said before, most of it was done. There is a letdown in the world, if not a disappointment. In 1955, a woman would say to her father, to her priest, "Father, why don't you write anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls?" Because in Christianity, there was this great awakening and awaiting. There were sermons and so on. But there were made certain beginnings by a fellow called Davis, by a fellow called Allegro, who came out with statements and with little books of irresponsibility. Completely, I can say irresponsible. But nevertheless, the further discussion concentrated mostly on basic details. This is a good scholarship. There is no more sensation because nobody wants to come out with sensations, and perhaps there aren't any. This have to decide the Christians themselves. As to Judaism, I said, many of us deal with what the halacha can give.
Perhaps Arab period would be better, or Crusader period, in order to assist students and interested readers to better understand the implications and complexities of archaeology for clarifying the Yahudites at a given site. In the Persian period, for example, the once dominant condition of Israelite or Judean that characterized earlier periods has changed, and new peoples and groupings of peoples come to be associated with individual sites and regions. The challenge of understanding those peoples through archaeology, thus, is far more difficult, perhaps, than in other periods. With the introduction of the Greek polis, or city, by Alexander the Great, and its elaboration and utilization by the succeeding Romans, we have a phenomenon not unlike in the contemporary world of a large variety of cultural units coexisting within a common framework. Some theories of the identity of the Essenes at Qumran and the literary sources that describe them. Whether archaeological data from other sites can be used to identify or to elaborate the nature of a particular religious group in the late antique world remains to be seen, but surely it is a quest worth pursuing.
Hier is de aankomer. Hier is de right of the field with the stories